Hey everyone, it is Sleepy Reader, aka Damien. This is my comic book thoughts video, my vlog about how I felt about the books I read this week. This is just covering the new comics that I picked up this past Wednesday. It's now Sunday, and I had 12 of them, and pretty much they were all excellent. I had a good time reading them all. Made it kind of tricky to rank them, and I almost caught myself not sticking to my super subjective rule, my rule that it's about what I had the most fun reading, because I think some of the ones that the critical part of my brain said, this is really something special in comics. My other part of my brain said, well, yes, but I enjoyed this other thing better. So I'm going to stick to that as always, because it's my little record of my thoughts and my reactions to things. So, in a way, there's an illusion where you might think, if you just looked at my videos where I'm always doing a countdown, that all the ones that came in last place were equally bad, or all the ones that came in first place were equally good, and there's no comparison. It's just the subjectiveness of that week's reading, that pile, just because I like doing it that way. And yes, I did not come up with the countdown kind of idea myself. I think the person I used to watch who did it all the time and did a great job of it was Ghost Critic. And I don't think he had quite the same purposefully subjective approach that I'm taking. But anyway, and right now another guy who's doing a countdown is the Comic Concierge. And that's a lot of fun to read. And he has a very analytical mind, I think. So it's interesting to hear his take on comics. His last video, I think, was about an hour long because he read so many comics that week. Anyway, enough of that. In at number 12 was American Vampire. This has really nice cover stock, but it's very shiny material, and you can see it picks up fingerprints, and I think they'll wipe right off because of the nature of the cover. And I love that cover by not Francavilla. What am I saying? It's Albuquerque by Raphael Albuquerque, who is the normal artist here, but instead this is kind of this issue is kind of a pause in the main story, and we get 3 short stories, each illustrated by a different writer. And each illustrated by a different artist, all by Scott Snyder. So we got Tula Latoy, and then, much to my excitement, we have one of my favorites who we don't see too often anymore, Francisco Francavilla. And I forgot who the final artist was. And will I be able to find the credits quickly? No, I won't. Oh, here. They have this special page here for the credits, double page spread for the credits. So the third story was by someone named Ricardo Lopez Ortiz. And his art was okay. It didn't click with me. Kind of has nice coloring. Even the Francavilla art wasn't, it was good Francavilla art, but it was not like outstanding. I don't know. It seemed, I maybe take Francavilla for granted a little bit. And the Tula Latoy art, it looks cool when you look at it at first, but it kind of bothered me because it felt like it had been drawn digitally, I assume, with essentially draw one face, then move it over here and change it just slightly. And there was just a lot of times where the face was the same on different panels. Even here, when the guy in bed, he's upright there, but he has the exact same face, but now it's got the covers tucked around him. But the reason why this came in last, and it was probably the only book of all 12 that I didn't have the most fun reading, because I was struggling the whole time to try to figure out who the people were, why it might apply to the story. It seemed like the material in this was aimed for someone who knows the entire American Vampire saga very well, and then they could maybe make the stories seemed to be wanting me to make emotional attachments to characters and the like that I didn't know much about. kind of looking at the stats of these comics. So this one was a $3.99 book, and that's how much it cost, $3.99, $4 basically. It had 22 pages. It had ads interrupting every now and then the story, which is something that increasingly bothers me, as I mostly read indies that don't do that. Although I don't think it was too egregious. There's some comics where it can be really egregious. And yeah, and this pretty nice cover. I mean, they put some money into the cover, so I appreciate that. Then in at number 11, and this is where already with number 11 I was struggling. Is this really number 11? But I had to put it somewhere. And basically, this is Batman Detective, written by Tom Taylor, drawn by one of the Kubert brothers. Was it Andy, I think? I'm terrible that way. Yeah, Andy Kubert. And very nice colors by Brad Anderson. Or very nice standard DC colors by Anderson. The cover stock was pretty nice. And amazingly, this had 26 pages of story. I almost wondered if they made a mistake and they meant this to be one of their $4.99 books. But anyway, I appreciated that. And the story about an aging Batman and a criminal who wants to undo his entire life's work is very interesting. The Adam Kubert art didn't... There were cool parts, but there's also aspects of it, like just this way of drawing Bruce Wayne that kind of didn't hit me the right way, like with his buzz cut and everything, and sort of the cartoony muscularness of him. But overall, I enjoyed this, but I still was left with the feeling that I've had for a while. And I'd officially stopped picking up. I just said, I've got to stop reading Batman. It just all feels too familiar. And even though this story is relatively unique, it still had that tinge of overfamiliarity. I still feel like I need a break from Batman. Although it was a good comic, and I could imagine, depending on the week, I might be tempted to pick up the next issue. I don't know how many issues. It's supposed to be 6 issues. So the smart thing to do would be to wait and pick it up later when I'm in more of a Batman mood. So then I, put in at number 10, and I was like, did I enjoy the Batman better, or did I enjoy this Thor better? I think I'm just into Thor more for the long term right now. I've been really enjoying the ride, even though perhaps it's in some senses kind of a shallow comic. I've been enjoying the ride of Donny Cates' Thor. In fact, it would have ranked higher because I really like the art and the color and have enjoyed this storyline a lot. But as a finale to the storyline, it seemed like it was cool till we got to the end. I guess I'll spoil it. When you see me put down this cover, you can start watching again if you're planning to read this. Basically, they defeat, as you would expect, the evil Don Blake, who somehow has gained all the powers of Asgard. And Odin is going to unmake him, to kill him. And he says, go ahead, do it. I'm miserable. I have no life. And then Thor tells Odin, no, don't do it. I'm the king. I make the decisions here. And this is my brother of a sort, and he's going to live. And so that seemed like kind of a mercy and interesting kind of dynamic might grow up. We have 3 different kinds of brothers then, maybe, with Loki, Donald Blake, and Thor, with maybe Beta Ray Bill also in the mix. I just thought that would be interesting. But then Loki tells Thor, I'm not the god of evil anymore. Why don't you let me handle him? And so Thor says yes. And what Loki does is, and if you know in Greek mythology, Loki's ultimate fate is that he's tied up to a rock and a serpent drips venom on him. I think he also does he have wounds that constantly need to be repaired every day? Or is that Greek mythology? Anyway, Loki makes Donald Blake, this version of Donald Blake, take on his fate. So he's going to be immortal and tortured for infinity. So I think that Odin's solution, not Thor's, was the more merciful one and perhaps the more just one. And this is, kind of an unjust ending to a character who went insane and became evil because he was essentially tortured by Odin. Now he's being tortured by Loki. So maybe that's a good thing. It left me feeling, I feel a little disappointed in that. Maybe it's a good thing to show how evil the gods are, no matter what, and the insanity of this character will continue, and he'll come back. Obviously, it leaves room for him to come back, although characters always come back anyway. In at number 9 for me, I was going to say, because I'm keeping my stats, Thor had 20 pages with plenty of ads interspersing the breaking up, interfering with the story. And the cheapest cover possible, as Marvel likes to do. It's not as bad as it used to be. I didn't notice my fingerprints all over the place and smudging, but it's definitely kind of a ripply cover, where the cover stock can't hold the ink that well. So in at number 9 was Scumbag, and I had dropped this from my pull list, but with the idea to pick it up whenever I happened to notice there was some cool art, and this had really cool art. I've never heard of Francisco Mobley before, but if I see his work again, now really it's a collaboration with the ongoing colorist Moreno Dinicio. So the two of them just worked incredibly well together, giving us a very sort of semi-painted look that I found very enjoyable. The storytelling was very good, the character designs and everything like that. So this was just a visual treat. And for a while reading it, I thought, well, maybe Scumbag is going to climb back up my charts, so to speak. But ultimately, I felt kind of tired of all the... you can see the idea here is he wants to make fun of all these different political types. And, equal opportunity, I guess, in making fun of liberal villains and conservative villains and all that. But I just felt kind of tired of the on-the-noseness of many of these villains and some of the good guys' dialogue too. What was I going to say? And I still keep wishing there are moments of scumminess, but it's not. It doesn't dig into its scumbagginess as much as you might hope, in a way, for me. Anyway, I had fun reading it, but it didn't leave me with the feeling of, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to keep up with Scumbag. And part of what hurt it was when I saw how much I loved this art at the store, and I saw they had the previous issue, I just went ahead and picked up that. In there, the art was okay, but didn't wow me as much as Mr. Mobley's art. This was Bengal. So Bengal did a good job. Mobili was brilliant. But reading the two together, I felt particularly sort of easily tired by the approach that this comic takes in terms of its characters and its villains and all that. A comic I really love, I put in at number 8. Oh, I want to do the statistics because I wrote them all down. So Scumbag had 24 pages of story. It had a preview. I always dislike previews at the backs of comics. I don't know. They just seem out of place. Oops, that's the wrong one. This Scumbag had a preview for another comic. Wait, does it? You know what? I'm wrong. My notes are wrong. I'm reading the wrong thing. It had some ads at the back, and the cover's okay. So 24 pages, an okay cover. The paper's not super thick, but not as bad as Marvel. And I didn't notice any ripples. But it is the kind of cover that if you don't bag and board it might, and you read it too often, will start kind of curling up. Yeah, it's a nice package. It doesn't have a preview in the back. The preview in the back actually is with Birthright. Birthright had just 20 pages, a preview in the back for a completely different book. And it's not logical of me, but I always kind of dislike that. Often maybe it would help if they put a page before the preview saying what it was and who it's by and when to get it and stuff. Preview didn't look bad, but then when I got to the end and I looked here, I figured, well, oh, this is the ad for the comic that the preview came from, and it's some kind of video game adaptation or something like that. I'm not even sure. Yeah, based on the game phenomenon. But somehow previews at the back always irritate me. And then there were a few more ads. And Birthright has all right cover stock. Also not super thick, but it definitely does not ripple and can take the ink and everything. But anyway, I'm really enjoying this sort of coda to the main Birthright story. As I've said, I think it's a whole 6-issue or 5-issue coda. And so I think there's just 2 more issues left. And this was another good chapter in that. The only reason why it's at the seemingly low level of number 8 is there were lots of other good stuff too. Oh, this is fun. In here, there's a little billboard in the city that's showing Ultra Mega there, another comic from Image. And so yeah, I can't wait to see where this one goes. Birthright kind of feels like the end of an era that began with Saga, where almost everything coming out from Image was hitting it on all cylinders. And Birthright kept going and produced a really good epic fantasy saga that I think will be great to get in trades or maybe in deluxe hardback someday. Hopefully it will come out that way eventually. So at number 7, I put Redemption, which, lots of ripples in the cover you can see right there. And Redemption had 21 pages, a few ads interrupting it, and these cheaper covers. I really enjoyed this at a very basic level. It was basically a bunch of fights and shootouts, and it was done in a fun way. There was one thing that I thought was odd, where we see that someone, well, there's this person is maybe a child molester, and that's the child they were molesting, or maybe not. It's unclear what happened here. And another thing is that I only realized by the end of the book that she stabbed this child in the eye. And the child shows up as an adult missing an eye later on, and that's only when I figured out what had happened. So there was the implication of some stuff in kind of the intro of the comic, which was 15 years ago or something, weren't totally clear. So that could have been better. But anyway, I enjoyed the Wild West post-apocalyptic gunwomen training kind of stuff, and the big shootout, and the art and color, everything I enjoyed about this. It's a very basic book. And as I've said before, clearly a pitch for a movie, as are almost all, if not all, AWA Upshot books. So, an Upshot book in terms of quality of production is very similar to a Marvel book in that sense. Let me see. Looking at my notes. This will probably be the last time I do notes. I almost never do notes. I keep trying to change these things a little bit for me to make it fun. At number 6, I would put Night Hunters, which is the book by Alexis Zurich and his writer, Dave Baker. Alexis Zurich comics, the artist is always mentioned first. And it makes sense somehow when you read them. It seems like the artist is what is in control. And this is a comic that I appreciate, and it's on the edge of kind of a very indie, modern, primitive kind of thing, and the plot kind of follows that feeling. It's not the art is cool, but it's not as exciting as his other comic, Space Riders. It's unfair to compare the two, but I just come in with that comparison anyway. I think I'm just, maybe because it's a less fun story, I'm less involved in the characters also. I mean, there's stuff going on with the characters, but it doesn't pull me in. And because of its kind of primitive approach, it's not totally clear who all the characters are and what they're doing, and why they're doing what they're doing. But still, it has its own kind of power, and I definitely am glad I'm getting this book. It has super thick covers, best cover stock of the week. This is printed by Floating World, which is a comic book store here in Portland that maybe publishes 1 or 2 comics a month of their own, usually in the very, art comic realm. This is probably as commercial as they get, I would think. It had 22 pages. It had some notes at the back. There were absolutely no ads. There were bios. There was these cool end pages. So it's a nice package, but it costs $5, $4.99. In at number 5, I'm putting Grendel, number 5 of 8. It's literally been a year since the last issue, but I didn't really have much trouble picking up. I remember that Grendel, or Grendel Prime, or whatever he is wandering from planet to planet, looking for a home to sort of reboot the Grendel nation, part of the human race, the Grendel Empire on another planet. But they're looking for some place that will be good for them, but where they won't have to kill off the locals, I think. And so this time so each issue they're exploring a different planet. So each issue is a little science fiction idea puzzle planet. And this was fun enough, a planet that had kind of a plague caused by its extreme technology. And it's, a world where everything is based on something like software. Everything's controlled by software, and the humans just pursued pleasure until the software killed them. And ultimately, he decides that it's, of course, because it's the 5th issue of 8, he decides that this world is not going to be a good place to restart the Grendel version of humanity. However, they do put it on their list of planets to come back to just in case. And happily, there were no ads interrupting the story, which, Dark Horse still does sometimes, but not in this comic, and they don't always do it anymore. And there were 22 pages. There were ads at the back of the book, and the cover did have some ripples in it. I don't know if I can show it to you. And the cover, like a Marvel comic. Actually, I don't know. The cover almost feels flimsier than the interior pages. So I like that one a lot. It's not really a character-based book. It's more science fiction ideas. And I'm a big science fiction fan, so I think a lot of people might find it too dry and just too dry without a lot of character flavor, and just kind of, we're going to explore this planet and see what happened here and have a different science fiction idea represented by each planet. In at number 4 was The Picture of Everything Else, which is a comic that's slowly growing on me. A lot of people whose opinions I highly respect loved this comic from the first issue, and for some reason I had a bit of a trouble getting into it, but it's growing on me. This issue did have kind of a flaw of a lot of info dumping, but perhaps it was the quickest way to do it. But I would have liked it if they acted out a bit more the backstory of this painter who can change reality, whose first painting that changed reality was the portrait of Dorian Gray, and now I think the twist of this issue is what I really liked about it. So I'm going to spoil it. So again, while you see this up here, you might want to skip forward. Basically, we learn that, in the first issue, we learned he could kill people with his paintings. Like if he rips up the painting. Oh, excuse me. If he rips up the painting or burns it, the person portrayed in the painting dies. Now he's exploring different and perhaps more altruistic way to use his powers, which is to do a painting of Paris that is immortal, an immortal Paris where no one ever dies and nothing progresses beyond 1898 or whatever the date is here. I don't think we're told. I think it started in 1895, but a few years have gone by. But there's some nice allusions to, and this definitely to change and progress in technology. And this was definitely a period where, with steam engines and then the oncoming of telegraphs and maybe telephones and electric lights starting to show up, huge technological changes. And they're sort of thinking maybe we've had enough technological change and not looking forward to the coming 20th century of possibly even more change. So that ties in nicely with this idea of, with his painting, he can kind of freeze Paris in time at a kind of still fairly idyllic point. And that would be very tempting to me too. I'm sure it will go wrong. And one of the things he did just to discover how effective his painting is he put this kind of red stain on the painting, which he plans to remove later, just to see if it was there in Paris. And to further experiment, he has his associate throw someone off the cathedral, but then the painting edits it themselves, and they didn't fall. They just suddenly are back on the ground and they're fine. So I'm really intrigued to where this is going, and I guess I'm getting more used to the pace and the characters and everything. So this is definitely a book I enjoyed a lot this week. So many books I enjoyed a lot. This makes up for those weeks where I say, I wonder why I'm spending so much money on comics. I'll put at number 3, Usagi Yojimbo, the final episode in what, in my reading of Usagi so far, has been the longest episodes he's done, is 3 issues. This was the end of a 3-issue episode. As I said, I think with chapter 2, in the sense of how good Usagi is, this is an A rather than an A+. And this issue was fun to read, and I enjoyed it, and it had all the goodwill in it, in my enjoyment that I already have from Usagi. So I'm just happy to get another entry into the Usagi Saga, which is not really a saga. It's more like a series of poems or haikus, or really nice short stories, really, because they're not like haikus. They're more satisfying. So this one, as always, was kind of bittersweet, but the bulk of it was like a Conan story in a sense, about 2 groups battling and some supernatural stuff involved. The color was very bright, and I actually liked that quite a bit. Is it still by Hi-Fi? It's a little brighter than... it's still Hi-Fi design as the color. It's a little brighter than previous Hi-Fi issues. I feel like they're getting brighter with each issue, maybe. I'm not sure about that. Okay, and then number 1 and number 2, I went back and forth. And should I say that they are tied for number 1? And then I picked the number 1, which I've left at number 1, as the emotional winner for me. But as I was flipping through, counting the pages I forgot to say, the picture, I'm angry at myself for not sticking to my script. The picture of Dorian Gray, the picture of everything else had 24 pages. It had ads at the back. The cover maybe had a slight hint of a ripple. It's the same as the paper stock, I think, but it's pretty good paper stock. But it might have had a bit too much color on it. Maybe all the pages, no, I can't find ripples on them. So 24 pages. And Usagi Yojimbo from IDW had very nice cover stock. Not super thick, but very nice. Holds the ink well, looks good. And 24 pages, no real ads, just a next month's cover and a checklist. So that was nice. I guess an ad for other Usagi materials, but yeah. And then, so what I put in my number 2, I almost switched to number 1 as I reminded myself of the art, flipping through the pages to discover that Carmen had 30 pages of story and art, and two sort of sketchbook pages at the back, and was a visual tour de force, even more than issue number one. A character who is constantly naked, and occasionally that's a little distracting, particularly when she's bending over. There was a scene where she's having an important conversation, but she was bending over, and I was like, the male brain in me right there kind of lost it and forgot for a minute to read the dialogue. What made this number two instead of number one is there's a sequence where this Carmen character is kind of psychoanalyzing and critiquing the claims of our heroine, whose name I can't remember now. It's something a little strange. But I found that part a little tiresome and a little on the nose, maybe a little cheap psychology. But the rest of it is just breathtaking. And, it's just a wild phantasmagoria where fantasy and the real world meet. I assume, this is so specific looking, I'm assuming this is a city somewhere in the Mediterranean. There's palm trees and the like. But, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous comic book. And although the psychoanalyzing kind of conversation was a little on the nose, it did help progress the plot a little. I felt in a way the death character Carmen was a little mean to this girl. We all have our slight psychological failings, and she was kind of pumping them up and blaming her for all her problems a bit more than was fair. And there was a bit of a cliffhanger kind of literally at the end, which is interesting because I know this originally came out in I think it originally came out in a single volume in Europe. But there seems to be nice natural chapter breaks that fit here. Maybe that's why this was 30 pages long rather than 24 or whatever. And I don't know how many pages the last issue was. So as a package, as a bargain, this one was incredible. And the cover stock is very nice. Okay, but for me, just my pure enjoyment, I'm giving number one to Kanto and the City of Giants number one. This is, I guess, the third Kanto series, miniseries, and I liked the other ones, but this one maybe just hit me at the right moment, or I'm not sure why, but it struck me. It kind of gave me similar vibes to when I'm reading that Norse mythology comic from Neil Gaiman and suddenly forgot the artist's name, but anyway, it'll come back to me. That Dark Horse Norse mythology comic that I've been enjoying so much, it just had the sense of mythology and folk stories done just right, just in a way that was just really enjoyable. The art was really good. The color was really good. The pace of the story, the sort of whimsy combined with pathos, but not too much of either. Good sense of humor. So, it's probably not, it's weird to maybe put it above Carmen in the sense that Carmen may be more of a major work of comic book art, or, possibly up there, or some of these others. It may not be quite as ambitious as all of those, but in its own little niche, it's extremely good and extremely satisfying, and I was really happy to read it. I'm really excited to see what happens next and get the next issue. So yeah, I'm like a giddy little Everything Comics when I'm reading this. So yeah, thanks again to Bob at Everything Comics who first basically pushed Kanto on me. Although I did say after hearing him rave about it that I planned to read it, but then he lent me a trade of the first series. So this is awesome, and I know Kanto's getting a lot of support from people in the comics community. It's interesting to see this groundswell backing this comic from the comics community. By that I mean the YouTube comics community. I don't know about the rest of the comics community. So yeah, and then I actually wrote out a ranking of these comics by their coloring, because I actually was very in love with a lot of the color here. So I ranked my least favorite color, but most of these I loved, and this one wasn't horrible. But Night Hunters, I ranked at number 12 for its color, even though the color is very similar to Space Riders, which I really love the color. Here I feel like his very raw, simplified color at times let down the story a little bit. That perhaps it could have used a little something more. So it just wasn't as effective as it should have been. In at number 2 was the coloring in Grendel, which I believe is colored by the son of Matt Wagner, so probably being colored exactly how Matt Wagner would like it to be colored. I'm sure he talks with his son about how he would like it to be colored. But I found the coloring kind of muted the art and just made me flow through the story a little less well than I might have with a different style of coloring. And then, see, I don't have them all lined up here now. American Vampire I put at my number 3 for coloring. At my number 10 for coloring, the third lowest. Love the colors on the cover, but the colors just didn't grab me here, particularly the Tula Latoy. My favorite colors were those done by Francisco Francavilla, and also was just not grabbed by the colors of the third story here. Although, none of it's that bad, right? So I can't even complain about coloring this week. But I just wanted to share with you. Then the next one was, where did he go? Was the Batman Detective Comics, which, as I said, was kind of a standard DC coloring. They did a good job on standard DC coloring. But I think that coloring doesn't serve the line work of Andy Kubert as well as it could be served by some other style of coloring. And my next one I put in was The Picture of Everything Else. This, I assume, is colored by Art and Colors by Kishore Mohan. And I don't know if those are hand-done watercolors. And watercolors not always my favorite kind of coloring. I'm sure a lot of people love it, but it has a kind of fuzzy tone to it that to me the color is kind of, it works on my brain and it works on my emotion, and so the more I like the color, I think the more it is effective on me emotionally, along with helping the storytelling along. And the coloring here was interesting, but it somehow didn't click as deeply as it might have. And then next, coloring, put at number 7 in the countdown for coloring, is Birthright. Very good coloring. I like it. It's a little bit on the raw side, but very effective. I think I swallowed some dust from one of these comics. Anyway, like that coloring, but I like the Thor coloring even better. I put that at number 6. Talk about getting the emotions right. The colorist here, who's Matt Wilson, once my absolute favorite colorist, but now I've seen him color a bunch of different things, and sometimes it works better than other times. He goes pretty bright here in Thor, which I think is a good choice, and fits kind of the bubblegum, emotional but bubblegummy kind of side to Donny Cates' Thor. So I think Matt Wilson's colors really fit the Donny Cates story. Next up after Thor, I put the Usagi Yojimbo coloring. I enjoyed the brightness of it, and the pinks and purples and things like that. So that was a lot of fun for me. I think it used to be Tom Luth doing the coloring, and he was a little more toned down than that. Anyway, I can't say which I like better, actually, for Usagi. And next in my little list here is, well, where'd it go? I put at number 4 the Canto Coloring, which was also very good colors, done by Sebastian Pires, the artist. He went for kind of an autumn tone, a little brighter, more vibrant colors than the previous Kanto artist. I think he's just a fill-in for this arc, and I wish I could remember the name of the regular artist. But his colors are a bit more subdued. But there's a similar palette here, but a brighter palette here, and that really worked for me. It gave it, there's kind of a bittersweet feel to Kanto, but also a light, fun feel to Kanto, and he as a colorist walked that line very nicely. Then I really loved, so I put it at number 3, the colors in Redemption by Lee Lowridge, who really found the right palette, I think, for this Wild West apocalypse story, so that he really carried the tone and the dark emotion of the feeling of sort of dread and retro, like this is old fashioned and yet in the future kind of feel. He has a really good touch for that. So I really liked his coloring here, and he really completes Mike Diodato's art in an extremely good way. So I really like that. And then my number, I missed something. Oh no, I did not miss something. My number 2, and I thought it was going to be number 1, colorist is, for this time around, Moreno Dionisio, the colorist who worked with Francis Mobili to create this beautiful painted-looking comic of Scumbag. And it didn't just make it look painted, but the pages have a kind of unity and then a shifting as the mood of the story shifts, so that I don't know. So it was very effective and appealing storytelling with the color, and maybe in a way the color is too good for the script there. I was talking about some of the other colorists matching the tone of the script, but the colorist here really elevates the tone of the feel of the story to a level that perhaps it doesn't deserve. But anyway, I think I love this comic as much for his art. The art is the unity of the art and the color. Let's just say that. But I had to put in at number 1 the incredible coloring in Carmen. I love the colors just on that cover, and on the back cover there. And I think he does his own colors. Yeah, he has a color assist from Tony Lopez. So Guillaume March, who's also the writer and artist here, was in charge of his own coloring. And it has a very distinctive palette, but one that seems very bold and unique, but not overwhelming, and that shifts from the blues to the pinks to the greens as you go along, or depending on the scene. So it's just an incredible application of color to the tone, feel, emotion of the story, and to the storytelling and the art, and just the aesthetic pleasure of flipping through this comic. For me, colors, I realize, are very personal, and that who's my favorite colorist shifts even faster than who my favorite artist might be. And my perception of what the best kind of coloring is can be pushed and shifted around by different creators very easily. So yeah, there's my list twice, with Carmen taking the top spot with the color. Boy, this is really long. I'll quickly do it anyway. For those of you who've made it to the end, I can show you some other stuff that I'm in the middle of reading right now. I just got this book, American Cult, It was sent to me by my friend and writer who I admire a lot, but writer as an essayist, Ryan Carey, and he has his first comic book writing in here. And I read his piece, and I read a few other pieces, and I have yet to decide what it's very intense reading all these true life stories on cults. And I feel a bit overwhelmed by how much there is in here, but I've really enjoyed the segments I've read so far, so I think I'll read a few more and then I'll take a rest. I read his was about Jonestown, so I read his, and I read one about Heaven's Gate. There was another one I read. I was looking at so many different things. So each one is giving you kind of a different, each individual creator or set of creators' decisions on how to quickly encapsulate, in 5 or 10 pages, the experience of cults. So this is definitely a very unique book. And then in prose, I am slowly working on this book called The Last Policeman. It's a detective novel that takes place within the months before a asteroid is going to hit Earth, and everyone knows it's coming. And so the world will either, whoops, I just lost my place. That was my place marker. The world will either be destroyed or they haven't, but it'll at least be radically, millions of people at the very least will be dead. And society's already kind of falling apart, but there still is a police department trying to solve murders. And then I'm still slowly working my way through volume 1 of, that's volume 3. Well, I pulled out the wrong thing. But anyway, I'm slowly working my way through volume 1 of Starhawks, and really just loving the Gil Kane art in here. I'm gonna do a video about Starhawks when I finish volume 1. And I got a bunch of these reprints of the Daily Spirit comic, which came out for 3 or 4 years in a few newspapers as a daily, along with the Sunday Spirit section. And but most of the time, Will Eisner was he only got to do like the first 2 months worth before he was drafted by the Army, or maybe he volunteered. I'm not sure which. And then other artists took over. It's lesser stuff compared to the great Spirit stories, but there was lots of germs of interesting things in here, and I've been having a really good time reading it since I'm such a huge Spirit fan already. I want to have everything Spirit related that I can afford. And I've been slowly reading some Goon issues. I just read this issue, and I kind of hit the point where things just weren't making sense for me. There were too many characters from previous stories, and maybe this issue 31 from the Dark Horse run was a bit of a conclusion to a lot of story threads. It's beautiful. It feels like there's a touch of Frazetta, a touch of Corbin, a touch of Will Eisner in Eric Powell's artwork, and it's really fun to experience. And then I'm also reading I don't know what volume in the Uncle Scrooge Carl Barks series this is, but it came out recently, I think, and I just ordered it from In Stock Trades, and it's a beautiful volume. And I love the paper, but it's not grabbing me yet. I mean, I'm enjoying it at a very low key level, and maybe this is not the place to start to. What's that? I don't know if that was. It's like some ink on the edge of there. I don't know if that's supposed to be there. And they're not published in order or anything. So I think I've read about 5 stories in here, and I enjoyed them okay. Each one felt like it went on a little too long. So I have to confess the sad case of me not being a Carl Barks fan yet. But I'm trying, because I don't know. I want to be a Carl Barks fan. Okay, the famous duck artist. Okay, I've usually been doing these comic book countdowns now in 20 to 25 minutes, and I've gone 50 minutes. So hopefully I will get back to the shorter ones, but this one just became a long one. Talk to y'all later.